The owner of the Pizza Pazza restaurant in Valley Center has been arrested on sexual battery charges. 65-year-old Mark DeSimone is accused of several incidents that allegedly took place at the shop. Newsday Tabby Alford has details on the disturbing claims and reaction from customers.
We went inside the Pizza Pazza to talk to the owner and the suspect. He did not comment. He told us to leave, so we did. So instead, we talked to customers. We do want to warn you that the details and the sexual allegations in the court record are graphic. Tuesday night in Valley Center at Pizza Pazza brought in families and couples for dinner and trivia night as usual. But what many customers did not know, that the sheriff arrested owner Mark DeSimone accused of several counts of sexual battery against two women inside the restaurant. He's out on bail.
That's very out of the sort of person that I know of.
Levon Norwood lives next to the pizza shop and is stunned to hear about the sexual allegations against DeSimone. Detectives say it involves two adult women.
I'm over here a lot, actually, and he's always been very polite to me, very businesslike and professional.
Detectives were not available for an interview, but say the 65-year-old was arrested on September 5th at Pizza Pazza. On Tuesday, the DA filed a criminal complaint stating between January and June of this year, DeSimone inappropriately touched and rubbed up against two women for sexual gratification. Two of the 5 counts of misdemeanor sexual battery involves putting a woman's hand on his groin and another time touching her private area under her leggings. It's unclear who the alleged victims are, employees or customers, and detectives do not know if there are more potential women. We went to the restaurant. We spoke to DeSimone, but he would not comment. We spoke to other customers during trivia night. They didn't want to go on camera, but they did want to tell us that they are shocked that Mr. DeSimone was arrested and that these sexual battery allegations don't sound like him at all. Social media posts say that Mark DeSimone opened Pizza Pazza with his wife in 2017. Detectives encourage anyone with information to call 760-751-4422. DeSimone is scheduled to be in court on October 17th.